Hello, and welcome to the Poetry Pea Podcast, a podcast all about the Japanese short-form poetry in the English language. Quite a mouthful, eh? My name is Patricia, and this week I have a question for you. What is haiku? What? I've done this before? You know I have, and I'll continue to do it. Why? Because I'm not sure we're recognising haiku, or senryu for that matter, anymore. A bit of a sweeping statement, I know, but I see an increasing trend for poets to write short poetry and get them published in haiku journals. And before you shout, "You hypocrite! First remove the beam out of your own eye, and then you can see clearly to remove the speck out of your brother's eye." Matthew chapter 7 verses 3 to 5 if you're interested. I shall be doing my best from now on to be more conscious of what I publish in the Poetry Pea Journal. You know that I'm constantly struggling with the concept of haiku in the contemporary English language world. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I was one of those kids that was always driving my mum crazy with the word why. And now I seem to be doing it to myself when I think about modern, contemporary haiku. When I read many online journals, and unfortunately some of the print ones, I often question why they continue to call themselves haiku journals, as many of the poems are now what I regard as short poems rather than haiku. If you were at Poetry Pea's first salon, you'll know that the discussion took a turn in this direction. Incidentally, I shall be bringing you the recording of the first salon, but there is and will always be a section at the end of each of them which is private and should stay within the confines of the meeting. Now, some of you who were at the launch of Janice Doppler's book, One Thread, at Treveni will have heard some of the points I'm going to make today. But that wasn't recorded, and I wanted to bring the short presentation I made there to you. In Janice's book, I wrote about Zoka, its relationship to kigo, the season, and why there is no haiku without Zoka. You know that if you put 10 haiku poets in a room and ask them what a haiku is, you'll probably hear 9 or 10 different answers. Maybe we can all agree that they're about nature? Maybe. But for me, that's not enough. You will know by now that I believe haiku needs a seasonal word. My work with Janice and the research I did on Zoka merely confirmed my belief. So let's look at a definition of Zoka to put this little presentation into some context. Robert D. Wilson says, Zoka is the creative force of nature that creates, decreates, and recreates the cultural landscape and nature as we experience it. But I ask you, what is it that enables that creative force of nature to create, decreate, and recreate? I maintain that it's the season. What is a season but a period of transformation? What is Zoka but the expression of this transformation? When we engage with nature and express this engagement with purposeful, significant seasonal references, then we are harnessing the creative force of Zoka to create meaningful haiku. That doesn't mean that we stick a seasonal reference into a short poem and bam, we have a haiku. I'm going to ask you to consider some haiku from One Thread and one other, and ask you to consider whether they are haiku or not. It's quite possible, even probable, that you'll disagree. And that's okay. I know you'll tell me, and I'm happy with that. This first poem I found in an essay by Robert D. Wilson, and there'll be links for you to read the essays if you want to follow that up. They'll be in the show notes. So the first poem. Breakfast cereal with store-bought raspberries, Christmas morning. Breakfast cereal with store-bought raspberries, Christmas morning. Jim Cation. Robert D. Wilson says of this poem that it lacks a collusion with Zoka. Why? Because the seasonal element adds nothing to the poem. All it does, according to Wilson, is to invoke memories of Christmas in the reader, and he questions whether this is enough. And let me read it to you again, and as I do, can you find any element of Zoka in it? Some element of transformation that the season should bring. Breakfast cereal with store-bought raspberries, Christmas morning. In fairness to Jim, even though I agree with Robert Wilson, it could be said that the poem is making a socio-political point. That, as humans, we are often out of kilter with our environment, with the seasons. Certainly if I was eating raspberries at Christmas over here, they would have been forced or brought from somewhere very warm. It would not be natural. I wonder, where do you go with this one? Do you agree with Robert Wilson? Now, as I read the poems I've chosen from one thread, let's consider the season. Does it comply with the idea of Zoka? Is the seasonal reference bringing life to the poem? Do we have a haiku? Autumn breeze ruffles the reeds, almost birdsong. Autumn breeze ruffles the reeds, almost birdsong. And that's by Nina Singh. Consider the scenario of this poem. There is a breeze, and it's ruffling reeds, creating a noise. That almost birdsong. And Nina could have written this. A breeze ruffles the reeds, almost birdsong. This version is about nature, but it's nothing special. Add autumn to the picture, and the poem is transformed. I don't know about you, but where I come from, autumn is not a season of birdsong, it's almost absent. And now in Nina's poem, the reeds have created something similar. The season transforms the poem into a haiku. The autumn breeze recreates the song of the birds. Autumn breeze ruffles the reeds, almost birdsong. Morning worship, a tuft of moss inside the icicle. Morning worship, a tuft of moss inside the icicle. Debbie Strange. Without the seasonal icicle, this poem is nothing. With the icicle, the sense of a miracle is overwhelming. Debbie has felt the Zoka, has seen the moss become transcendent, entombed within the ice. The seasonal reference has relevance. Clearly, to me, the poem is a haiku. Morning worship, a tuft of moss inside the icicle. Debbie Strange. Even when we are gone, cherry blossoms. Even when we are gone, cherry blossoms. Arvinder Kaur. Zoka, as I said, is about renewal, growth, death, renewal, a cycle of transformation, which Arvinda clearly shows us in this haiku. Perhaps if you look at this as a one-line haiku, it's even more apparent. Even when we are gone, cherry blossoms, even when we are gone. You can read this haiku in a circular motion, reflecting the ideas behind Zoka. The clickety-clack of Gamma's treadle, falling snow. The clickety-clack of Gamma's treadle, falling snow. Joe Balistreri. In this haiku, the falling snow perfectly mirrors the rhythmical sound of the treadle. There's a unity of season and machine. Adding to this, the snow, a winter kigo, suggests the idea of an old lady, perhaps coming to the end of her days. And the year is coming to its end. The old ways also nearing their end. The clickety-clack of Gamma's treadle, falling snow. And now I'll give you a couple of mine. Feel free to criticise if you like. Happy for you to do that. Harvest rain, the mountain crossing a farmer's eyes. Harvest rain, the mountain crossing a farmer's eyes. As you'll know, I come from a farming family. Until I was in my late teens, I would have seen a couple of generations watching out the window, overlooking that mountain, gauging the weather. Weather is critical to the farm. Harvest being critical to the well-being of the farm animals. This poem is all about harvest and regeneration. Harvest rain, the mountain crossing a farmer's eyes. The neighbours call him special, wild garlic. The neighbours call him special, wild garlic. Is this a haiku? Does the seasonal reference, the wild garlic, add anything, or is it pointless? Wild garlic grows here in the spring, so for me it speaks of renewal and hope. But it's not everyone's cup of tea, and has a rather repugnant smell. Thus, I hope the juxtaposition of wild garlic and the unspecified chap who the neighbours call special brings meaning to the poem. I wanted the wild garlic to suggest that whilst the chap is not what society sees as normal, he is of value. I love to pick the wild garlic leaves and use them in soups or salads. Anyway, I hope that my message gets across. But you know what? Maybe it doesn't. The neighbours call him special, wild garlic. I hope in this short presentation I've gone some way to convince you that Zoka and the season are inextricably linked. That if we have no season, we have no Zoka. And thus that there is no haiku without Zoka. If I've not convinced you, perhaps I've got you thinking about it, and that in itself will be almost enough. I hope you've enjoyed the poetry this time. I hope I've got your brain ticking away, thinking about haiku that you'd like to write. Haiku, using Zoka, talking about transformation. It's great fun. And as always, thank you for joining me. And if you have any thoughts, slip them over to me in an email. I'm happy to read them. If you're wondering if there'll be more Poetry Pea Salon meetings, the answer is yes. But they are small gatherings, and those of you who are members of Poetry Pea will get first dibs on a seat in the room. So do have a think about joining the membership if you haven't already. And if you'd like to know more about Zoka, I did record that salon, the first one, in which Janice came along to talk to us about Zoka and about her book, One Thread, and she was joined by a number of fabulous poets reading some of their work. It's worth hearing. And you can. So do join me next week for more poetry and a visit from one of the editing team. It's a wee bit special, especially if you like creepy crawlies. Until then, keep writing. And there will be citations in the podcast that you can go and check out that might help you learn a bit more about Zoka. Ciao!